Okay, so this is a quick lesson describing the different watering levels that you would experience in a greenhouse with various crops. So let's go through this. This is adapted from a Ball horticultural document authored by Will Healy. How wet is wet? How wet is too wet? What's the right moisture level? Those are really hard to assess when we don't know that we're all talking the same language. So it's important, and the industry is trying to establish a common language so that growers can communicate between each other desired moisture levels in the soil. Because someone might say, well, yeah, I just water to, what's right. And the other say, well, what's right? What's right for you? I don't know. So this W system was established. Now, before we start, there's some facts that are presented, and they are absolutely true. Um, this first one, the profitability of a greenhouse, especially we're talking about ornamental greenhouses here to some extent, because in the vegetable sector, uh, with the drip irrigation and whatnot, that's pretty uniform. But in the ornamental and medicinal, this is a big challenge. And a lot of the profitability hangs on the grower that's walking around with the hose. Um, More often than not, incorrect water application does more damage to any crop than any other thing, than pests. So more often than not, pests and fungal infections are the direct result of inaccurate or incorrect watering. So here, pesticide and growth regulators only compensate for incorrect water application. So it really is important that growers learn how to do this. And you guys are learning, you're just starting out. It's really important that you get a handle on this. Anytime crops are growing slow, there's reduced quality or a poor harvest or even poor post-harvest, like shelf life or curing, is the result of poor growing. So it's really important we get moisture right when we're growing crops. So different things to talk about. There's, how is water used? Where do you use it? How much to use? Those are, we're covering those in later in this and other courses. But when to water is what this is all about. And that's the W system. So when do you water? And so these W levels give us a common language, W1 through 5, right? 1 being very dry and 5 being absolutely saturated. So think back to your plant science 2 where we did those labs where we saturated pots of soil with tape on the bottom, and then we removed the tape and water drained out, and we looked at aeration and all that other stuff. This is exactly related to that. So these W levels describe the water content in soil. So let's start with 5. At the W5 stage, the soil is absolutely saturated, right? There's no air in the media. If you were to take the soil and squeeze it, lots of water is going to dribble out. If you look at the surface, you can see that it's shiny, it's glistening. So there's tons of free water. It's puddling. This is usually right after you've watered. So that's okay. It's, you just watered the plug trays. That's okay. It's going to drain. Gravity will quickly remove the water, and you won't be at a W5 level for very long unless there's something blocking the drainage. Then you got to deal with it. Who knows what that could be. Typically, the media is very black and shiny. So W5, like the previous slide said, if you squeeze the soil, lots of water comes running out. Okay, I want you to relate back to squeezing the soil because as a grower in the real world, that's what you're going to do. You're going to grab some soil from a pot, you're going to squeeze it, and you're going to feel it, and that's going to tell you what level it's at. So W5, grab some soil, squeeze it, lots of water runs out. Obviously, W5 is saturated, so there's no oxygen. So if it were to stay like that for very long, the roots would collapse and die. W4 is where the water is fairly wet. This is what remains after gravity has drained from saturation, right? So we started with level 5. The water's drained from gravity. We're left with a recently watered soil. That's level 4. So it's typically shortly after you've watered a crop. If you take a fistful of soil from this particular stage and squeeze it, water will readily run out. Now, it's not going to run out like level 5, but it's going to dribble out. A fair amount's going to dribble down your wrist. And then when you relax your grip, the soil is going to hold its shape, kind of Play-Doh-like. It's not going to crumble apart. It'll kind of show you a snowball or whatever. I don't know how much you grab, but and typically the media is brown, less black at this stage, dark brown. Okay, so that's W4. Now, W4 level is still considered a high moisture state. I think the only time you really would see this is when rooting cuttings, or if you're dealing with a very dry environment and you're trying to keep the roots from being damaged, so you have to water a little more frequently. That's not common in our climate, so that's less of a something you'd run into. Definitely W4 is a risk for fungal infection. It's wet, and your plants are at risk of stretching. Too many growers grow at a W4. For years, I grew at that stage. I thought that was the right stage. And then I had a guy visit me, a consultant, and he showed me the error in my ways. And after I learned to grow on the drier side, I found that my fertilizer consumption dropped immensely, because when soil's very wet, you get denitrification and stuff like that. So I had quicker crops at a little better quality. It made a difference for me. So that was a big lesson for me to learn as a grower. W3. This is most often the ideal. This is the ideal level. W3. Okay. How do we know? All right. We're going to take a soil full of soil. We're going to squeeze it, and only 1 or 2 drops is going to come out. Just 1 or 2. That's it. And when you let go, the soil is going to kind of crack a little bit. It's not going to crumble, but it's going to crack. And that is the perfect moisture level for a crop. You're going to get the most rapid growth, the healthiest roots, and the most efficient fertilizer use by keeping your crop as close to W3 as you can. I would say often growers water too early at this stage. You know, they say, oh, my crop's drying out of water, and they bump it right back to W4. That's generally speaking not the best strategy. You want to wait till you're at W2. So plants most often respond well with good root growth and reduced stretch when a grower waits until W2. So W3, we have a brown soil. When you squeeze it, we just get a couple of drops, and when you let go, the soil cracks apart. That's the critical thing for you to remember. During hotter, more rapid growth seasons like the summer, it is important when you're growing around W3 that you monitor your EC levels. Because remember, let's say you irrigate in some fertilizer and then you get some dry down. If the plant hasn't used those fertilizers completely, they will build up salt levels. And typically, as you go into the summer months, you will not water with feed every time you water, because you're watering more frequently. And you're typically, if you water with fertilizer every time, you're delivering fertilizer more often than the plant can use it. So either you lower the EC or you alternate with clear water between feeds. Sometimes multiple days of clear water, or hours, or whatever, depending on your crop, before you apply fertilizer. And you're going to monitor your EC levels constantly to assess that. There is no formula for this. It's just you need to know what is appropriate for your crop. And in high drying conditions like summertime, especially monitor your EC levels, because as the crop dries down, you can achieve potentially damaging EC levels in the root zone. W2. This is when the soil is light brown. As you can see in these pictures, it's a little crumbly. When you squeeze it, no water comes out. And when you let go, the soil actually crumbles. It's not a matter of cracking, it just crumbles. This is where this is the last stage where plants can actually access water, and you really got to be on top of your ECs here. This is where roots can get damaged. W1, this is when there's no water. It's basically gone. The soil is lightweight, light brown. If you put it in your palm, it won't form a shape. You can actually blow it out of your hands. It's bad news. Your plants are not going to do well. And for a lot of media types, like peat moss especially, after you reach a W1, it's very difficult to rehydrate the media because it becomes hydrophobic. So I hope that clears up what the watering levels are. I think when you're in the greenhouse with Matt, you should experiment with taking some soil out, lift the pots off, and take the plant out of the pot, grab some soil off the bottom, give it a squeeze, assess the water content, put it back together, and chuck it in the pot again. You know, don't throw it away. But experiment with that. Try different parts of the greenhouse. You'll see often in corners or where there's airflow, you might get more drying. Every greenhouse has its quirks, and as a grower, you get to learn that sections need more water than others. And sometimes we can mitigate that with, different airflow patterns with fans or draping curtains off benches. But every greenhouse is like a different kind of car. You buy a new car, you got to learn its quirks. And it takes some time as a grower to figure that out. But once you've got it figured out, then you know how to control it. So uneven watering typically creates a lot of challenges. This is just a simple bedding plant tray. You've got completely wet spots and completely dry spots. This is what we have to avoid because you're going to end up with really uneven crops and uneven success because some plants will be, healthier and others will be fungal and others will be dead. So it's really important that you get uniform irrigation and do whatever you can to obtain that. And if it means you need to change equipment, then you should do that. All right.